Story 1. The 2-3 Switch. I never thought a light switch could ruin my life. Moving into my first apartment alone should have been exciting. But the first night I slept there, I realized excitement was never going to be part of the equation. The building was old, a brick structure that had survived decades and storms and neglect. The kind of place where the air smells faintly of mildew and every floor creaks as if whispering secrets about the people who lived there before. I had taken the apartment because it was cheap, centrally located, and nobody asked questions. I unpacked my boxes quickly, set up my bed near the window so I could catch the city lights, and tried to convince myself I was fine. That night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to a flicker. Not the kind of flicker that comes from a dying bulb, the kind you barely notice if you're awake. This one was precise. Short flash, almost like someone had tapped the switch, and the light above me responded. I dismissed it. Old wiring, I thought. Nothing to worry about. I went back to sleep. The second night, it happened again. 2, 3 a.m. Short flick, long flick, just once, then gone. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe I had dreamed it, but the third night confirmed it. 2, 3, same flick. My apartment was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator, and the city outside was asleep. I began to feel watched. I told no one. Friends wouldn't understand. They'd laugh. It's just a light, they'd say. But something about the timing, the precision, made it impossible to ignore. By the fifth night, I was exhausted. I barely slept, dozing for an hour or two before the flicker woke me again. I tried recording the switch with my phone, leaving it on the floor facing the ceiling light. I tried sleeping in a different room. Nothing worked. The moment I fell asleep, it happened. And always at 2, 3. The flicker wasn't just a flicker anymore. I began noticing patterns, subtle ones that didn't make sense to the logical part of my brain. It was communicating, but not in words. Short flick, long flick, short, long, always in sequences that felt deliberate. I started keeping a journal, documenting the pattern. At first, I thought it was random. Maybe my sleep-deprived mind inventing a code where none existed. But by the 8th night, I could predict it. 10 short flicks, followed by a pause, then 5 long flicks, and then silence. The pause, it was the worst part. The silence stretched for what felt like minutes, but in reality, it was probably only a few seconds, enough time for your imagination to start filling in shapes in the darkness. I began seeing shadows, not normal shadows, shadows that flickered at the edge of my vision, vanishing whenever I looked directly at them. At first, I convinced myself it was exhaustion. My brain playing tricks, but I swear, there were times when I could feel something moving just outside the beam of light, something small, maybe crouched, watching me as intently as I watched the switch. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop. By the 10th night, I was obsessed. I stopped leaving the apartment. Food was delivered. I didn't answer calls. My friends sent worried messages, but I ignored them. I was counting flickers, writing patterns, watching the switch, trying to decipher whatever message it was sending. I didn't know if it was a countdown, a warning, or just a cruel joke. And then it happened. The switch blinked in a sequence that I had never seen before. 11 flicks, followed by a pause. I counted them obsessively. 11, 12, 13, It kept going. I wanted to leave, run, smash the switch, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed by a mixture of fear and curiosity. By the time it stopped, the night was gone, and I hadn't slept for 14 hours. I knew I was losing my mind, but I didn't care. I needed to know. Something, deep inside, told me the building was alive, or that something was watching me. The apartment, the walls, the creaking floors, they were all listening, and the switch was how it spoke to me. I didn't sleep the entire next day. My body kept trembling in these short, involuntary spasms, the kind you get when you've had too much caffeine after no rest. But I hadn't had coffee. I hadn't eaten since the day before. I just sat on the couch, staring at the switch from across the room, waiting for the night to come, waiting for 2, 3 hours crawled. I could hear footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment, a neighbor walking, maybe or maybe not. At some point, I realized the footsteps were too soft to be from someone walking normally, too measured, too careful, like someone trying not to be heard. They moved past my door, paused, then continued. I held my breath. My hand hovered near the lock even though it was already locked. Then, silence. A deep, ringing silence that almost hummed in my ears. When night finally arrived, my heart raced like something was about to burst out of my chest. The clock read 1:56 a.m. I positioned myself on the floor directly under the ceiling light, phone recording again, though by then I knew the footage would never show anything useful. The switch never moved. The flickers happened without it budging even a millimeter. I wrapped my hands around my knees and stared up, barely blinking. 1:59. A faint shift in the air. Not wind, just a feeling. Something subtle, like the atmosphere changed density. My ears popped. 2:1. I felt a mild pressure on my chest, like someone pressing a hand just lightly enough to let me know they were there. 2:3. The light flickered. Once. A long blink. Slow. Almost lazy. Then again. Short blink. Long blink. Short. Short. Long. But something was different. The code, whatever it was, didn't feel random anymore. It felt slow, deliberate, patient, like someone was taking their time to pronounce every flick as clearly as possible. I counted each one aloud, my voice breaking. 9 flicks, pause, 3 flicks, longer pause, 5 flicks, then absolute stillness. I don't know why, but something inside me whispered, "It's finished." The air in the apartment felt immediately wrong. Heavy, thick. My skin prickled with cold goosebumps even though the heater was on. I waited for something to happen. Anything. A noise. Another flicker. A shadow. But nothing did. The room stayed completely silent. I finally moved, slow as if pushing against water, and forced myself to stand. I walked to the switch on the wall and examined it closely. Same old white plastic, a little dusty, nothing strange. I touched it. The moment my finger grazed the switch plate, the lights snapped off. Not flickered. They snapped, like someone had slapped the switch down, except nothing had moved under my finger. I stumbled back, heart pounding in my throat. The darkness was thick, suffocating. I couldn't see my hand even when I held it inches from my face. Then I heard it, breathing, Not mine, it came from the corner of the room, low and shaky, as if someone was trying not to panic. A small, strained inhale followed by a trembling exhale. I froze. My own breath grew shallow, trying to match its quiet rhythm so I wouldn't disturb whatever was there with me. The breathing moved, slowly. It scraped along the darkness, shifting angles, repositioning itself. I felt it now, stronger than sound, the sensation of someone watching me from inches away. A presence, not warm or cold, just there, almost touching me. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I was convinced that if I did either, something would snap inside the dark, something that had been waiting behind those flickers, waiting for recognition, waiting for me. Then, as abruptly as they had gone off, the lights returned. I blinked hard from the brightness, tears forming instantly. The room was empty. The corner was empty. But I wasn't relieved. Because in the harsh glow of the light, I finally noticed something new. The light switch had changed positions. It was now halfway between on and off, tilted at a slight angle, a position it physically shouldn't stay in. It should have either clicked fully on or fully off, but instead it hung there, like an indicator pointing somewhere between two worlds. My knees buckled. I grabbed the wall to steady myself. That was the first night I heard the scratching, light, almost delicate at first, coming from inside the walls, a slow drag of something sharp against the interior wooden beams. It traveled behind me wherever I went, bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, always following, always just behind the plaster. I pressed my ear to the wall once and instantly regretted it. The scratching stopped, and something tapped. 1, 2, 3 taps, directly against the other side of the wall, right where my ear was pressed. I fell back so hard, I bruised my hip. For the next 2 nights, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The scratching continued non-stop now, sometimes soft, sometimes frantic. There were moments when it sounded like fingers, human fingers dragging rapidly across wood, then slowing, then tapping again. I covered my ears with pillows, blankets, even my hands, but the sound vibrated through the floors, the walls, my chest, my teeth. By the 3rd day without sleep, I was hallucinating. Objects warped at the corners of my eyes. The shadows of furniture seemed to shift on their own. Once, in the bathroom mirror, I saw a figure standing directly behind me, black, crouched, head tilted unnaturally far to one side. When I whipped around, nothing was there. I had reached my limit. I needed to leave. I started packing what little I had unpacked: clothes, toothbrush, wallet. As I shoved things into a bag, I realized something terrifying. The scratching had stopped, completely. I froze, half crouched beside my bed, listening. Silence. A thick, unnatural quiet. I slowly lifted my head. The light switch was pointed directly upward, now straight, vertical, balanced in a way that defied physics. My entire body went cold. The overhead light dimmed, not flickering, just draining away, as if being slowly swallowed. I tried to move, but couldn't. It felt like invisible hands were holding my shoulders in place. The dim light above me grew weaker and weaker until it was almost gone. Then the switch flipped down. Everything went dark. But this time, the darkness wasn't empty. I didn't hear scratching anymore. I heard footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps on the floor, coming toward me. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The footsteps stopped right in front of me. The air was thick with something hot, like a breath hovering inches from my face. Then, a voice, small, hoarse, like vocal cords that hadn't been used in years, whispered. Finally, the lights burst back on with a force that buzzed through the walls. The room was empty, but I wasn't relieved, because something had changed permanently. The light didn't feel like light anymore. It felt like an eye, watching me, waiting for 2, 3. I ran from the apartment that night. I didn't pack anything else. I didn't lock the door. I just sprinted down the hallway, down the stairs, out into the freezing night air. I booked a motel room and stayed there until sunrise, shaking uncontrollably. When I finally worked up the courage to return in the morning, the apartment door was slightly open. A faint, constant noise came from inside. I pushed the door with my foot. It creaked open slowly. My bed was overturned, clothes shredded. The light switch was gone. Just gone. Nothing but a rectangular hole, where it used to be. And from inside that hole, something was breathing. Softly, patiently. I left the apartment for good. Never returned. Never went back for my things. I moved across town, changed my number, blocked anyone who lived in or near that old building. I tried to start over. It worked for a while. I slept again. I ate real meals. I felt human. Until last week. I woke up at 2-3 a.m. The lights in my new place were flickering. Short flick, long flick, short, long. The exact pattern from the old apartment. The old apartment I never told anyone about. The old apartment whose switch was gone. And now, as I'm writing this, the light switch in this room is pointed straight upward, balanced, impossible, waiting for something, waiting for me to fall asleep again. I haven't slept in 6 days. I don't think I'll make 7. Not if the lights go out first. Story 2. The Knock at 3:17. I never believed in coincidences, or ghosts, or anything that went bump in the night, until the knock started. I had moved into my new apartment on a Tuesday. It was a small studio on the 5th floor, modern, clean, a little too quiet for my taste, the kind of quiet that makes you hyper-aware of every little sound. I loved the silence at first. It felt like freedom. The first week passed uneventfully, until Wednesday night around 3:17 a.m. That was when I heard it, a single, sharp knock at my door. I froze in bed, staring at the darkened hallway outside. My mind immediately tried to rationalize. Maybe a neighbor, a maintenance worker, someone delivering a package? But no one had the keys, and I had just checked the door before bed. I told myself it was nothing, maybe the wind. But the knock came again. 3:17 exactly. Short, sharp, deliberate. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in bed, heart pounding, listening. I didn't know what scared me more, the knock itself or the realization that it had a pattern. The next night, it returned. Again at 3:17. I tried to ignore it, tried to sleep, but as soon as my eyes closed, I could hear the faintest creak of the hallway, the tap of footsteps that weren't mine. I would lie awake until dawn, staring at the door, too afraid to breathe. By the 4th night, I had stopped telling myself it was the building settling. The knock was deliberate. Someone or something was waiting outside my door, watching me, testing me. I began recording, placing my phone on the table near the door. The recording confirmed it. Exactly 3:17, every night, the knock. And sometimes, just sometimes, A pause afterward, like whoever or whatever was listening for my reaction. Sleep became impossible. I tried everything: pills, meditation, late-night shows. Nothing worked. Every night, the knock returned. And every night, I became more aware of the silence in the rest of the building. Not a single sound from neighbors. It was like the apartment had gone mute, leaving me alone with that knock. Then came the dreams. At first, they were vague. Shadows in the doorway, a dark figure at the edge of my bed. But soon, they became more specific. I would wake up, the dream still vivid in my mind, and the knock would follow immediately. Sometimes, it felt synchronized, as if the dream itself had summoned the knock. The figure was always the same: tall, thin, standing just beyond the peephole, motionless, watching me. And the more I tried to look directly at it, the more it disappeared, only to return the next night. By the seventh night, I was barely functioning. I skipped work, avoided calls, and barely ate. My friends began to notice. One of them came by, worried, but I couldn't explain it without sounding insane. The knock didn't care. It came every night at 3:17. And when I tried to ignore it, it became louder, more urgent. I began to feel like a prisoner in my own apartment. I started writing messages on sticky notes, leaving them by the door, trying to communicate. Who is it? What do you want? The knock never answered. Sometimes I thought it hesitated, as if reading my notes, but never acknowledged them. My exhaustion turned to paranoia. I began to check the peephole obsessively, seeing nothing but darkness, yet feeling eyes on me. Sometimes I thought I could hear breathing. By the 10th night, I was ready to move. I had packed my essentials, determined to leave before 3:17 a.m., to escape whatever was tormenting me. But I fell asleep anyway, against my better judgment. And when I woke, the knock was different. There were 3 rapid knocks, then a long pause, then a single, drawn-out knock. And after that, silence. The silence was heavier than before. I realized, with a chill crawling up my spine, that it had known I was going to leave. It had timed it. I couldn't explain why, but I understood. This wasn't random. Whoever or whatever was outside my door wasn't just knocking. He was testing me, learning me, and waiting for something. I never moved out, not immediately. I became obsessed with waiting, observing, documenting every knock, every pause. I started seeing patterns in the pauses, sequences that didn't make sense at first but seemed deliberate. Short pause, long pause, short, short, long, as if it was spelling something, though I couldn't read it. I barely slept, living on coffee and sheer panic. And sometimes, when the knocks were close together, I could swear I heard whispers, so faint I couldn't make out the words, yet enough to feel dread pooling in my chest. Weeks passed. I stopped telling anyone. I stopped trying to rationalize. I just waited, and each night the knock came, always at 3:17, always deliberate, always watching. I realized I wasn't just losing sleep. I was becoming part of whatever game was happening. I didn't want to be, but I couldn't stop. Then came the night I finally understood. I was lying in bed, staring at the door, exhausted beyond comprehension, when I noticed something I hadn't before. A shadow at the edge of the peephole, moving ever so slightly, synchronized with the knocks. And then it happened. The knocks paused, the shadow lingered, and I felt chosen, not in a good way. Something inhuman, something patient and ancient, had decided I was part of its little ritual, and I realized that no matter where I went, the pattern would follow. The knock at 317 wasn't just in my apartment. It was inside me now, embedded in my perception, my heartbeat, my very awareness. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't leave. And even now, I can hear it in my dreams, counting down, waiting for 317. Always. Every night. I've moved since then. I live in a different city, a bigger apartment, windows that open onto streets bustling with life. But sometimes, when the clock ticks past 316, I can hear it. Just a faint tap, tap, tap. And I know it's still there. Watching, waiting, counting,